Welcome to the World's End DVD Extras.
What the hell's going on?
It's about 5 friends trying to regain their youth, or rather one man trying to regain his youth and somehow corralling his 4 other mates along with him for the night.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome.
The central theme of the film is your hometown is not what it used to be. Is that because you've got older or has something else happened? And in this case, in the film, it's like, well, both. It's like sort of, the hometown has changed because you got older and it's not as nice as you remember it was. But also, yes, there is something else happening as well.
Well, it's weird, isn't it? You come back and everything's the same, but sort of different.
The idea, for me at least, goes back a long way because when I was 21, I had gone on a pub crawl in my hometown and had a kind of crazy night afterwards where I'd lost all track of time and tried to kind of like meet up with this girl that I vaguely thought I'd made arrangements to meet. In running away from the house in embarrassment, I ran into a clothesline and knocked myself out like on a clothesline and then woke up later. I'm not that proud of it, but it did stick in my head as being a particularly eventful night.
Probably 8 or 10 years ago, Edgar and I went and hired a car and a cottage down near Bath with the intention of doing a bit of writing. And in the end, because of one thing or another, we didn't do any writing at all. We just kind of drove around Cheddar. We didn't really do any work.
I think we came up with the idea for this movie on a plane to Sydney on the Hot Fuzz press tour. Partly it came from a script that Edgar had toyed with at a very young age called Crawl, about a pub crawl. but also about notions of going home to where you were from and it being very different. And we like the idea that, you know, it wasn't because you changed, it was because the town had changed completely. And how had it changed completely? Well, it had been overtaken by, you know, alien robots. I think at that time it was simply that.
Holy shit. This is all connected.
I like the John Wyndham books, like, you know, Day of the Triffids and the Chrysalids, and especially the Midwich Cuckoos. And one of his critics, actually, I think Brian Aldiss, said of John Wyndham, said that his books are like cosy catastrophes. Now, the thing is, I see that phrase and I think, yeah, but that sounds kind of like there's something in that. And in a weird way, Shaun of the Dead and The World's End kind of have that element of cosy catastrophe in terms of, like, you know, it's a very middle-class apocalypse.
How's it looking?
Normal. Very normal.
Edgar, Simon and Nick and Naira, who produces it, they make very good films. And it's a kind of film that I've never done before. So I wanted to be involved in it. And also, we all know each other. So it was like, do you want to come and spend 4 months hanging out, making a film? So it was a combination of the people. And I thought it was a very clever script, very funny.
It's very, very well-written stuff. It's stuff you don't really have to work too hard at, because it just is immediately funny. It does what it wants to do. You don't have to wring any kind of comedy out of it. It's immediately funny. It has a great rhythm to it. It skips along.
Yeah, I got it. It goes, yeah, it is a pronoun. What is it? It is, yeah. What is?
I don't get it. You just used one. Did I? Yeah, it is a pronoun.
What is?
It.
Is it?
Christ, no!
I think it works.
The process of writing it was swift and harmonious. Edgar and me always write together in the same room, but I think this time was probably the easiest in an odd way, and I think it's because we have a rhythm now and a understanding of each other's processes, and we were very much on the same page, perhaps more than ever, I think, on this one. Each of us had a lot to bring to it, you know, our own personal experiences, and it's the most personal of the three films, I think.
Sorry. Edgar said something to me very interesting when he said that every film that he's done with Simon and Nick, there's always been a biographical element to them. So there's always an element of you giving over your testimony, which I'm a great believer in what, as an artist, you do. You give over certain aspects, not through celebrity, but through an art form.
It's really hard to pick a sort of favourite scene because we had such fun with all of it. You know, I love writing the final scene. The argument with the light, you know, was just, we laughed a lot during that.
I think you've bitten off more than you can chew with Earth, mate. Yeah, because we are more belligerent, more stubborn and more idiotic than you can possibly imagine.
We actually wrote a letter to the BBFC while we were writing to ask them how many times we could say the C word and retain a 15 certificate. And, you know, it was a very serious letter, and we got a wonderful letter back very quickly explaining to us that it's all about context and about how one uses certain words, and if it's used in violence or sexual violence or against a woman, it can be an immediate 18, but if it's said sort of lightheartedly, as we do often in the film, you can say it 5 times. So we were like, oh great, so we can say the C word like all these times.
Your reliance on profanity is a measure of your immaturity as a man and as a species.
Why don't you just get in your rocket and fuck off back to Legoland, you Yeah!
I came to be involved when Working Title rang up and said, would I come and participate in a read-through of Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright's new film? So I said, absolutely. It's irresistible. We can all imagine reuniting with the people we haven't seen since we were at school and trying to relive the past or relive one of those epic nights out you had when you were 18, and it's fantastic. And there's always one guy who kind of hasn't moved on and is still just the same as they were, and you think, when are you going to grow up? I was suddenly thinking, who's that in my group? And if they can't identify them, then it's probably you. Hey-ho.
It's a bit grown up, isn't it?
Yep.
The initial kind of concept was like a galactic Starbucks. It was like, what if there was this huge galactic corporation that was trying to Starbuck every planet in the universe into being this, you know, uniform, brand-specific thing, you know, and that its raison d'etre was actually very, you know, good-natured in a way. It wanted the galaxy to be a safe, kind of homogenous place, but obviously at the expense of all individuality and everything that made Earth what it is would have to be eradicated. And that became our big bad, you know, and that's what Gary and the boys go back and face when they go on their pub crawl.
Are you guys robots? Well, the word robot actually comes from an old Czech word, robotnik, meaning slave.
You don't want to do that.
Oh, don't I?
We need different terms. One for people that aren't robots, and one for robots who aren't robots.
Does anyone know what robot means?
Hello, I am a robot.
Mouth 6, 7, 8, 1. Step 2, step 3, step 4.
Our intergalactic visitors want to make Earth more efficient, but to do that they have to make people less human. And it's thereby about taking away all the flaws, but then the question is that, but aren't our flaws what make us human? So suddenly Gary King's character, who has been the villain of the piece in terms of being an incredibly flawed person, is now human number one in terms of like making the case for like our mistakes are what make us human.
Frankly, who the fuck are you to come down here and tell us what to do?
I also feel like Edgar and me are slightly misunderstood as being parodists, if there's such a word, but, you know, Shaun of the Dead was never supposed to be a parody of zombie films. We wanted to make a zombie film, we just happened to make it a comedy as well. We adore action films, and not being able to make an American action film, because we're neither American nor particularly action-oriented as people, we had to make it in the UK, and it had to become a comedy so that we could do that, you know. And we didn't, in making The World's End, want to parody anything. We wanted to make a film. It is resolutely without any reference to any other film. What we thought we'd address, if we were going to take on anything, was the notion of British social science fiction, and not parody it, but take on those tropes, those ideas.
The thing that we thought was like, it'd be great to do like a sort of sci-fi paranoia film, like more in the vein of like the Quatermass films, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or John Wyndham, or John Christopher. There's a really good strain of British sci-fi post-war social science fiction that's all of that kind of, you know, political paranoia and xenophobia manifesting itself in science fiction films. The alien menace, the word menace is in inverted commas because I think in this film, the outsiders, the invaders, see themselves as benevolent.
She's a blank. She's a blank.
It's not like the War of the Worlds where they're coming in, they're destroying everything. The network want to build, you know, they want to kind of, they don't really want to replace many people if they can help it with blanks. They send in this certain number to try and gradually, slowly indoctrinate Earth, and it could take 200 or 300 years. You know, they replace a certain amount of people, and from those people, from the personal political standpoint of the individual, it all spreads gradually, globally, until eventually the Earth is, you know, you could see it as positive, you could see it as cancerous. It's just an interesting idea, and it comes from social science fiction.
It's sort of a metaphor about that Ma and Pa kind of industry completely being wiped out by the super chains. But the twist is, was the coffee any better in that old cafe, or is Starbucks better? And the answer is probably the new coffee is better. And so it's this strange kind of lament for something that maybe wasn't that great.
I don't remember this at all. Has it been refurbished?
Been bought by a chain, hasn't it?
Part of that nationwide initiative to rob small, charming pubs of any discernible character.
Starbucking, man. It's happening everywhere. Can't take away the smell, though. Sure they tried.
The Starbucking thing is more, I think, a comment on the kind of person who would say, yeah, it's Starbucking, man. You know, where you would say to that, well, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like, nothing else in the rest of your life supports this, you know, rebellious streak about, yeah, it's Starbucks, like as if just complaining about Starbucks is an answer. You know, it's not an answer. And I don't think Simon and Edgar feel that Starbucks is particularly bad, otherwise we wouldn't have been ploughing that much money of our petty cash into it for the last 2 months.
Maybe we're not the local legends you think we are.
Gary King.
Speak for yourself, mate.
You're barred.
The whole notion of being sort of superseded has always been a concern of ours. It was in Spaced, back in Spaced, we had the whole episode with the kids having the party upstairs and the youngsters, you know, that they get into trouble with in Camden. Those things were all about, there's always somebody younger than you, there's always somebody, you know, that's going to supersede you, and the whole idea of getting older has become particularly polarised in this one, you know, because we're all turning 40 and and our concerns have changed and our outlook has changed.
Allow me to carry the legend forward. Let the man you have become be the boy you were.
I think this film sells quite a profound message, which is never go back to the place you were born. I mean, I think it's really an existential piece about when midlife crisis hits, just keep going forward, really. Don't look over your shoulder. The past is a scary, scary place.
Get the fuck in!
When we was on set the other day and we were fighting dozens of robots and heads flying all over the place and I was getting covered in blue ink, I turned around and said to Simon, why can't you just write a film about midlife crisis where we all just, you know, we all just have normal lives? Why have we got to fight aliens to... But that's what's clever about the film, really.
Action!
You need help, Gary.
You know, we've also learnt from Shaun of the Dead that it's possible to combine serious issues with comedy. You know, this is still an outright comedy. It's probably the silliest of the three, but it's also, yeah, it does have a very dark vein about addiction and suicide and all this stuff, which is kind of, you know, deeply serious.
It can't all be a good time. It has to be bad sometimes, otherwise you'll never know how good really feels.
They told me when to go to bed. Me!
I like that about these guys, that they can take those themes and it's a totally different road to where I'd go with it if I was writing it. And I love that.
You know, being silly is a serious business when it's done well, and I think it's a very necessary business. And there's an awful lot of silliness in their work that is hard to do well, and they do really cleverly.
How's,
Vanessa.
No, your wife.
Vanessa.
Yeah, how's she?
She's good.
You, had sex yet?
We have 2 children.
Oh, twice! Get you, fuck machine! We haven't changed, have we?
What's he doing here?
Gary King, on the exterior, appears to be an inane sort of like youther who simply can't let go of his childhood, but he's actually a mentally ill suicide on the run. You know, you can't get much more kind of serious and dark than that, and we didn't want to shy away from that aspect of it. You know, it's important to us, I think, as we don't just want to turn the camera on to funny people and have them improvise and then knit it all together and release it as a comedy. We kind of care more about the process than that, I think.
Let's do it serious, shall we?
And so yeah, it is pretty dark, but I think it's gleefully dark, you know.
How was the funeral, Gary?
Your mum's funeral?
It's difficult to put into words, but if I had to choose 3, I would say really, really sad. Oh no, that's 2, isn't it? How about really, very sad?
Because I've never done comedy before, it's very easy to have a laugh with people when the camera's not rolling, you know, when you sit down and have a laugh. And I found it very hard to bring that sense of humour and relaxation and timing to my work, because it's not usually called upon. And it was very interesting being around Nick and Simon and Edgar, that they encourage you and nurture you in that way.
I hate you! You fucking bastard! I'm gonna go. You fucking bastard! I hate you! You fucking bastard!
In many ways, comedy is much more precise. It's almost more staccato, and it's more. There's more of a discipline to it.
I love actors who are just like ordinary people, who don't have that sort of like sense of self-importance that some actors might have sometimes, who perhaps overestimate their position in the world. Eddie is incredibly down to earth and just very skilled, and that's the best you can hope for with an actor.
I think Eddie has had to dip into a different place to do this, to find some different skills that he didn't know he had, you know, that he wanted to explore. You know, he's great like that, Eddie. He's a kind of a technician as well, and so he would look at this as a challenge to play, you know, comedy.
He brings a wonderful sort of sweetness to Peter, which, you know, as we started shooting and I did more scenes with him, I started to regret Peter's fate more and more in the film. I was thinking, oh, this is a shame. We always kind of had people in mind for the roles, and it helps to have actors in mind when you write a role, because it just makes them a little bit more 3D in your head, you know, to the point when, you know, we'd often write, instead of Oliver, we'd write Martin Freeman or Eddie Marsan instead of Pete, you know. We wanted to get a little dream team together. You know, we wanted to assemble 3 other actors aside from me and Nick who just were at the top of their game, and that's exactly what we got in Martin, Eddie and Paddy, who, yeah, I'm a huge fan of all 3 of those guys.
They're all fantastic actors, and the times when we got to do big, long 5-6 minute takes of heavy scenes, I felt like I was at the friggin' Donmar warehouse, you know what I mean? It was great. And, you know, when you're acting next to Martin or Paddy or Simon or Eddie, you have to up your game.
Each one of those guys in Eddie, Martin and Paddy have a different quality, you know, and there are different kinds of actors, and it all seems to fit so well together. The 5 of us have an absolute blast on set. It can be very silly and wild at times, and we have to be slightly kept in order. For 5 40-year-old men, we've got 11 children between us. We can be incredibly immature.
8, 1.
I think they just wanted their mates in it. You know, I think they wanted their mates in it to sort of be whatever. You know, I can't blame them. Me not included in that, but I'd want those people in my film as well.
You know, when you've got 5 people who all believe in a project and are all willing to stand around when it's at some points during the shoot -9 and the crew are kind of caked in crystals of ice, and yet what you do is just laugh all the time, you know, it's a good living, it's a good way to work.
Reset, very careful, please.
Well, Martin doesn't like the fact that his younger version needs a nose.
Really, though? I mean, look.
I don't personally see it.
I don't see it.
No.
Look, I mean, is my nose that fucking big? It's like, you look like someone in a Bergerac.
Martin's totally different engine, totally different actor, switched on all the time, very aware of everything that's going on around him, and it's just fascinating to see, you know.
Was that modelled on mine or on somebody else? Was that modelled on Ken Stott or something?
His whole technique as an actor, I think, is really admirable. He has incredible restraint and subtlety, but also, you know, impeccable comic timing.
I can't believe it, man.
We all muck about and we have jokes, and Nick Frost is the joke of the pack, really. He always gets me laughing. Yeah, we all have a laugh, really. I think that's it, and I think it'll come across on the film as well.
I'll tell you who's really impressed me. Nick is amazing at action sequences. He's just brilliant. It's just so funny and powerful, and it's probably all the training in Cuban Fury has made him amazingly deft on his feet. He's fantastic. I love watching Nick do his action sequences.
Nick's a force of nature. Nick's an incredibly lovable guy, and just funny. Like he doesn't have to try, and he's a brilliant actor. Just great people to be around.
Well, I, for one, think it's nice to see your faces again.
Cheers, mate.
I've really got a lot from him, and particularly Simon. I've just got back into acting on this film. You know, I was out of love with it, and I've only just started to find it again on this. It's been creeping back slowly, but it's really come back. And I've got a lot of Simon. He's very dynamic. You can see him thinking, and it's a real natural gift he's got, apart from being a brilliant comedy writer as well with Edgar. He's got a great natural gift. When he's acting out a scene, you can really tell, and I don't think it's his technique. I think he just was luckily born with this thing where he visualises everything that he's doing and acts it out, and it's been fantastic for me to see. It's really given me a good kick up the arse, you know, and helped a lot.
Simon's just brilliant because so much goes through his face, which is just exciting. There's this wonderful shot that I was looking at this morning, and there's this expression on his face that's like, shall I rescue her or shall I finish this pint? And it's a look of pure sort of dilemma and consternation, and it's brilliant, completely brilliant.
You okay, Sam? I need a cigarette.
Rosamund came in for the read-through, and I thought she was off the table, to be honest, because she was with child, and we were reading through. I thought, she can't possibly be ready to start the film by the time. But of course, it was 8 months later that we actually started shooting. So thankfully, she was able to join us.
I had never worked with Rosamund Pike before, and it's funny, like, we went out for dinner and she was asking me all about the character and stuff. So who's the character based on? So I told this story about a friend at school, and I went out with his younger sister at one point, and then we stopped dating. And then my friend also went out with his sister. So then and then he stopped dating her as well. So then there was this extremely awkward period where we had both been out with our best friend's sister. And Roz being super method goes, are you still in touch with her? Can I meet her? I was like, yeah, I haven't seen her for 10 years, but like, we're still in touch on Facebook and stuff, so I guess I could. So Roz went to meet her in her hometown, which was outside of London. I wasn't present, and in fact, I haven't seen her since either. But they apparently had a whale of a time and went out for a drink and a meal. And then sort of, Roz came back with, yeah, I got it. So I look forward to my ex-girlfriend watching the movie. I didn't know the character comes off very well, so she should be happy.
Can we not talk about my sister in relation to A, massive wide-ons, B, Stephen's erect penis?
All right.
I mean, basically, the key character point of Sam is that she had it away with Gary in the disabled toilets when she was 16, and one hopes that by the end of the film she might be having it away with Stephen.
Andy, what the fuck?
As always, when you're doing action sequences, there's quite a lot of time between setups and people aren't disappearing back to trailers and dressing rooms. I mean, Simon is pretty much on set the whole time. And so, you do get to know them pretty quickly.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome.
They're grown-ups now, and that they don't want to do that, and that's not their idea of fun.
Come on! Gary's one of those people who you'd say that their star shone brightly very early on and then faded. We all had those people who were the coolest guys in school. All the girls wanted to go out with them, all the guys wanted to hang around with them, and then they end up being, failures in life, really. Gary is the epitome of that.
Gary's a wanker. He's done something bad to every single character, He's the kind of kid that you'd know he was a wanker, but he'd come round your house and your mum would think he's a smashing lad, that Gary King. But he's, injured all of us and fucked us all over in one way or another over the course of the years, so... Yeah, he's a great character, Gary.
Edgar and I had this idea that the reason Gary dresses the same way is that it might not necessarily be that he's dressed like that for the whole 20 years, but he's dressed like this for that night. It's like when you see an American military officer commit suicide, they put all their clothes on, they put all their medals on and their white gloves, and then they put a gun to their head. That's essentially what Gary is doing in this film. You don't learn that until the end, that he's literally got nothing left.
He's the most wounded out of everybody. He's the one that hasn't moved on at all, that's still trying to hold on to that part of himself that really can't move forward. And so he is a really damaged guy underneath it all.
That's fucking good.
In the outset, he appears to be this very frivolous, stupid, slightly irritating guy, but in actual fact...
Same car, he has the same mixtape, he's wearing the same clothes, he hasn't evolved at all. And that's where a lot of the tension lies. They're constantly looking back and trying to reference the past when it's not always the healthiest thing to do,
You're enjoying this, aren't you? Yeah, just 5 guys on a night out, having a great time.
Pretending to have a great time. Are you pretending? If we get out of here alive, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, great.
Andy just wants nothing to do with the past anymore. Newton Haven represents all that disappointment and all that kind of lack of scope, and now he's away from it. He's kind of ashamed of it a little bit, I think.
What the hell is this? Why are we even here?
We are here to get annihilated.
Nick's a really good actor, and we didn't want to just have him be the foil all the time, and so Andy is much more of a complex character. He starts out hurt and serious and devolves as the night goes on into something more like he was when he was younger, and so it's a different dynamic as well between Nick and I.
You find out toward the end of the film Andy's marriage is in trouble and he has no one at home, so that's the reason why he decides to go on the pub crawl, even though he's absolutely teetotal and has been for 16 years, you know, after this terrible thing happened.
Ah! I fucking hate this town!
I think ultimately Gary disappointed Andy. You know, Gary, he looked up to Gary for so long, and then, you know, the sheet was drawn away, and Gary was just this pathetic idiot.
Shots! S-H-O-T-S! Shots! What are you doing, Gary?
And what you find out at the end is that's what he's most angry about, is that Gary let him down, you know.
He loved Simon's character, you know, he really looked up to him, and so when he, you know, when he lets him down so terribly, it's a real blow, and I think he struggles and fails to recover from that. You know, it informs upon him for the rest of his adult life up until the point when he decides to get off that train and get into the beast.
Come on, you bellends, we're going to be late.
There is something in Gary's tenacity and there's something in his naivety that it nearly does work, actually, in holding the group together, because he's like a whirlwind of enthusiasm and denial. You know what I mean? While we're all looking at him slightly askance for different reasons, that ball of energy, you just have to give into it.
Okay. Martin Freeman plays Oliver, who is somewhat based on when I was at school. There was this kid in my kind of...
I think Stephen was somebody who wanted to be the leader, but he never quite made it because Gary was always wanted in between them, splitting off as teenagers and coming back. I think Stephen's tried to put some distance between that version of himself and the new one. And I think he quickly realises when they meet again that he really hasn't moved on. As soon as they get back together, that dynamic kicks in, and Gary's still the leader, and Gary's still the person that he can't get one step ahead of, who he resents, really, and doesn't come to really love till the end of the movie.
Something always got in the way.
They've all outgrown Gary in certain ways, but in others, they're still deeply rooted to him, you know. He gets them all individually in the ways that he always used to manipulate them, you know. He kind of bullies Peter, he flatters Oliver, he challenges Stephen, and he emotionally blackmails Andy. And, you know, even though they've all grown up, they're still in...
He's been bullied, so he's a victim of bullying, and he still lacks self-esteem and self-confidence.
Peter is often just looking around like, you know, like still a 16-year-old boy, like a fish out of water.
It's funny that when all these characters get together, essentially they're still the same people they were when they were 16 and 17. So that's what Peter has to overcome. He has to find himself and find his self-esteem and find his courage throughout the story.
Here we go. I'm a bad man.
I was bullied at school, and I bullied. I was kind of in the middle of the pecking order, you know. So I could identify with Peter, and I could identify with what it's like to come face to face with the guy who bullied you and made your life a misery for 5 or 10 years. So it's very, very poignant.
Leave it, mate. It's not worth it. Yes, it fucking is!
Take 5.
Here we go, this is the one, guys.
He likes a lot of takes. He's very, very precise.
Okay, straight again, here we go. Go straight again, one more on the right.
One more. He's very exact, works.
One more straight again. One more, ready, one last one.
One last one. Good running, guys.
Neither of us like to compromise unless we really have to. So, I don't know, it was quite nice meeting a director who just wanted what he wanted, and we just, you know, fought for every single thing together.
Yeah, give it? Yeah, cool.
You just have to sort of, you know, watch and learn, really, with Edgar and Simon. I mean, they're an advanced species of human being, really. You know, I just marvel. I sit and think, when will I become as evolved?
Sorry.
There is no room for imperfection.
Hey, Earth isn't perfect, all right? And humans aren't perfect. And guess what? I ain't perfect.
Please, be seated, kids. Now, let's have a little chat about your future, shall we?
If you watch Hot Fuzz, there's a scene in Hot Fuzz when the Village of the Year judges come across the devastation that is Sanford, and there are 3 judges, and this thing falls behind them, the Village of the Year thing. One of them's my mum, one of them's Edgar's mum. And the middle guy is a guy called Mr. Wilde, who was Edgar's drama teacher. And Mr. Shepherd is very much based on Mr. Wilde, who is this sort of cool guy, you know, the teacher that everybody likes, the teacher that isn't a threat. So we needed someone who had authority and was cool, and someone that they all could aspire to. And Pierce's name came up.
Silence, please. Shooting.
Well, I don't know about call, I don't know about authority, but anyway, you know, one just tries to pretend at the end of the day.
Mr. Shepherd?
Please, call me Guy.
All right. Guy.
Edgar phoned me one day and said, what do you think about Pierce Brosnan? I was like, what, really? Are you for real? Because we, you know, in our discussions, we hadn't really aimed as high as Pierce. You know, we were talking to some great actors, but certainly not someone with Pierce's sort of like movie star credentials.
Guess what, kids? They want us along for the ride. Pretty cool, eh?
I think he had a good blast working with the cast, because, like, you know, his scene is with all the other actors, and, you know, at the point that he comes into it, they're all quite drunk, so he's sort of playing a very, like, straight, sobering influence on these kind of, like, sort of increasingly juvenile drunks.
Are you a robot, sir? No, Peter, of course I'm not a robot. They revert to their childish behavior when they encounter Mr. Shepherd, and Mr. Shepherd, I suppose, in name alone, is this man who is their counselor, their cool teacher, the man that they always went to with their problems, and so they take refuge in his being there in the Beehive pub.
But you're on their side, though.
This is not about sides, Stephen. It's not about shirts versus skins. It's about working together as one team.
He's just brilliant. And one of the things that for me, just really identified Pierce's professionalism and worth as not only as an actor, but as a human being, was that in all the scenes where we had to look off camera and imagine Mr. Shepherd doing stuff, Pierce was there for that. He stayed the whole day and he did all his off lines and all his off eye lines. I mean, not all actors would do that, but Pierce actually stayed behind and did all that, and for me that was like sainthood.
Also, what's great about him is that even though he's most famous for his kind of action and parts and Bonds, you know, he is a great comedy actor. You know, if you've seen The Matador, or even in films like Mars Attacks or Mrs. Doubtfire, he's always really funny. In the first couple of drafts of the script, it was the character's name was Mr. Wilde. There's a bit in the film where they talk about a Shakespeare quote on the wall, exit pursued by bear.
Drink up, less boo-boo. Boo-boo, what is that? You remember less boo-boo? You know, from Mr. Shepherd's classroom, it said on the wall, exit pursued by a bear, you know, from that Shakespeare play?
A Winter's Tale.
Yeah. What was it called?
A Winter's Tale.
That's it.
That was on my theatre studies kind of classroom, and me and my friends used to stupidly joke, because we were 17, we used to say, exit pursued by Yogi Bear. And then it became like, you know, so the whole joke in there of like, let's Yogi and boo-boo, let's boo-boo, came from that. It was like, came from that quote.
Drink up, let's boo-boo.
The thing is that when we started writing The World's End, we thought, well, actually, maybe we can make this a trilogy.
We're kind of like a cross between the NWA and the zombies. You know, there's sort of a sort of coming together of those two forces to create this super enemy, which is what we face off against in The World's End. And so it's a fitting conclusion to those three films.
Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good, pretty good.
Sean is like sort of the nonchalant Londoners' take on the zombie apocalypse.
What do you think we should do? Have a sit down?
I love a genre.
To make the experience of watching the film a gratifying one. You know, there's always connections to make, and I hope people pick up on that and see The World's End as a unifying chapter in the series of